I paid for my daughter's entire wedding on one condition: her father wasn't invited. When I found out she secretly seated him in the front row, I called every vendor and canceled the wedding without asking her. Before we go on, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. I called the main supplier while looking at a photo I should never have received. The phone screen was still on the table, vibrating with notifications I didn't open. The photo was fixed there, as if it didn't need to move to cause harm. I had already taken a breath. I had already decided what to say to the man on the other end of the line, but it still took me a few seconds to speak. Not because I doubted, but because something inside me was finishing breaking. I paid for every detail, with a single condition. One image was enough to break it. I'm Carmen. I'm 56 years old, and until a week ago, I thought I was accompanying my daughter at the most important moment of her life. Now, I'm not sure what I was doing. Maybe defending something that only existed for me, maybe building a wall too late. I raised Valeria alone since she was 4 years old. I don't say it like a medal. I say it as a fact. Her father, Esteban, left one ordinary morning. There were no screams or broken plates, just a backpack leaning against the door and a vague promise, the kind you can't claim because it was never concrete. He said he would call. He never did. For years, I adjusted reality to make it hurt less. At school, I made up excuses when they asked about him. On birthdays, I said he was working. At school events, I occupied 2 chairs, one for me and another that remained empty more out of habit than hope. I didn't speak ill of Esteban in front of Valeria, nor did I defend him. He just wasn't there. And over time, that absence became a kind of background noise, annoying, constant, but normalized. Valeria grew up seeing that effort as something natural. I also got up early, worked extra hours, came home tired, and still sat down to help her with her homework. I never thought of claiming anything. I never asked for applause. I told myself that's what being a mother was, that one day she would understand. When she told me she was getting married, I felt pride, yes, but also a fear I couldn't name. It was as if something was closing and I didn't know if I was inside or outside. I offered to pay for the entire wedding almost immediately. It sounded generous. It sounded good, even to me. I didn't want to control her. I repeated to myself, I wanted to accompany her. I wanted to be there. There was one clear condition, stated out loud. Esteban would not be present. Not at the ceremony, not at the party, not in any photo. Valeria looked at me without surprise. She nodded. She said she understood. She said she wasn't planning on inviting him. There was no discussion, no tension. That ease should have alerted me, but I chose to believe her. For months, I lived among budgets and lists. Venue, catering, music, flowers. Each payment was a strange mix of excitement and exhaustion. Sometimes, when I signed something, I thought about everything I had held up alone to get there. Not as a reproach, more like a silent accounting that no one had asked me for, but that I kept anyway. The photo arrived a week before the wedding, without a message, without an explanation, from a number I didn't have saved. At first, I thought it was a mistake, some image sent by accident. I opened it without expectation, and there was the dress rehearsal. I recognized the place, the chairs, the layout, and in the front row, sitting as if he had always belonged, there was Esteban, dark suit, relaxed posture, his hands resting on his legs, like someone who doesn't have to justify himself. My body reacted before my head. I felt my stomach clench, a heat rising in my chest, a stiffness in my back. I found myself staring at absurd details, like the shine of his shoes or the way he occupied the space. He didn't look like an uncomfortable guest. He looked comfortable, too comfortable. That same night I confronted Valeria. I didn't shout. I didn't deny anything. She said she needed to close circles. She used those words, close circles. She said it was her day, that she wanted both parents present. She talked to me about forgiveness, about healing, about things that sound good when you're not the one who is there holding the weight. I listened to her, but all I could hear were years of silence turned into a decision made behind my back. I reminded her of the agreement. I didn't do it calmly, nor with fury. It was like reading something written. She said she thought that with time I would understand, that she hadn't wanted to tell me so suddenly, that she hoped that seeing him would change something in me, as if the problem were the method and not the fact. I didn't think. I acted. I called the main supplier with a photo still open on the phone. My voice sounded firm. Too firm. I asked for the cancellation. I heard conditions, penalties, deadlines. I accepted everything without arguing. Then I called the venue, then the catering, then the music. Each call was easier than the last, as if something rigid inside me had been activated and no longer needed permission. When I hung up, Valeria was crying, screaming, saying I was ruining her life, that it was her wedding, that I had no right. I replied that I would not allow the man who destroyed us to celebrate with my money. I used harsh words. I said, hell. I said, damn betrayal. I didn't quite recognize myself, but I didn't stop either. That night ended without a solution, just with a thick, heavy silence that lingered in the house. I went to sleep not knowing if I had done the right thing, or if I had just crossed a line from which I wouldn't be able to return. And still, as I turned off the light, the image was still there, fixed in my head, as if it hadn't finished showing me everything it was going to cost. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was constantly thinking about Valeria, but because my body wouldn't let me. Every time I closed my eyes, I returned to the image of the rehearsal. Esteban in the front row, as if he had been waiting for that moment for years. I got up several times to drink water, to check my phone, to walk around the house in silence. Everything was in its place, and yet nothing fit. The next morning, the house seemed different. Not bigger or emptier, just different. Valeria hadn't left her room. I heard movement, footsteps, some muffled sobs, but I didn't dare to knock on the door. I didn't know what to say without hurting her again. I also didn't know if I wanted to fix something or just stand by my decision. The messages started to arrive, family, friends, acquaintances who had found out about the cancellation before I could explain it. Questions disguised as concern, lukewarm comments. No one asked what had happened. Everyone assumed I had overreacted. I limited myself to responding minimally. I didn't have the strength to justify myself. At noon, Valeria came out of her room. Her eyes were swollen and her face was tense, as if she had been crying and arguing at the same time. She told me she had spoken to her father. She said it just like that. Her father, not Esteban. That change hit me harder than I expected. She explained that he was willing to help with some of the money, not all of it. Of course, with some, as if that balanced out decades. I felt a dry laugh escape me, not of mockery, of disbelief. I told her it wasn't a matter of money, that it never had been, that what hurt me couldn't be fixed with a deposit. She replied that I always took everything personally, that I couldn't see beyond my own pain. She talked about her childhood, about questions she never asked out loud, about a need to understand where she came from. That's when I realized we were speaking different languages. I was talking about boundaries, she was talking about closure, I was talking about respect, she was talking about forgiveness. Neither of us was lying, but we weren't listening to each other either. In the afternoon, there was a family video call. It wasn't planned, it just happened. Someone suggested it, and before I could refuse, all our faces were on the screen. Valeria quickly took the floor. She showed old messages of mine taken from private conversations, phrases said in moments of fatigue, of fear, of anger. She said I'd rather see her alone than betraying me. I heard my own voice, written down, and it sounded worse than I remembered. Harsher, more definitive. Some relatives fell silent. Others said I had crossed a line, that a mother can't set conditions like that the past is the past. I tried to explain that it wasn't about a wedding, that it was a symbol, that I wasn't going to finance a reconciliation that erased me, but every word seemed to arrive too late, as if they had already decided who I was in that story. Valeria didn't speak anymore. She ended the call without saying goodbye. At night, she started packing a suitcase. She didn't ask for my help. She didn't look at me. I stayed in the kitchen, sitting, listening to her open drawers and closed zippers. I thought about saying something, anything, but I couldn't find a sentence that didn't sound like a reproach or a surrender. When she left through the door, she was only carrying what was necessary. She told me she was going to stay with a friend for a few days. She didn't say when, she didn't say if she was coming back. She asked me for the keys, and I gave them to her without arguing. The slam of the door wasn't loud. It was dry, like a misplaced period. That night, for the first time in years, the house was completely silent. Not the comfortable silence of when someone is sleeping, but that other kind that weighs you down. I sat in the living room with the lights off, surrounded by suppliers' papers, canceled contracts, receipts half returned. Some of the money was lost, another part would come back in weeks. None of that mattered much. What mattered was the feeling of having defended something I believed was right, and, at the same time, having lost the person for whom I had done everything. I wondered if I had really protected a boundary, or if I had used money as a weapon because it was the only thing I had left. I didn't find a clear answer. The next day, Valeria didn't write, nor the day after. I sent a short message just asking if she was okay. There was no response. I started noticing details I hadn't seen before. Her favorite mug was still in the kitchen, a coat hanging behind the door, small things that now seemed to accuse me in silence. I found out from others that the wedding was officially suspended, that Esteban had offered to help more, that some said I had reacted out of pride, that others understood, but didn't justify. I heard everything as if from a distance, as if the story no longer belonged to me completely. Every night, I would ask myself the same thing: if I had done the right thing, if I had confused pain with right, if I would ever be able to explain to Valeria that my fear wasn't about losing control, but about disappearing. And meanwhile, the calendar kept moving forward, marking the date that never came, reminding me that some decisions can't be undone. You just have to learn to carry them. The days passed, and the silence stopped being a surprise and became a routine. At first, I checked my phone every 5 minutes, as if Valeria might suddenly appear with a poorly written, hurried message, saying she needed to come back. Then I started spacing it out, not out of resignation, but out of exhaustion. The body also adapts to absence. The house was still full of her traces. They weren't big things. A forgotten charger in the living room outlet, a jar of cream in the bathroom that wasn't mine, a list taped to the fridge with wedding tasks that no longer existed. Each object seemed to have its own voice, reminding me that all of this had been real, that I hadn't imagined it. I found myself thinking about Esteban more than I wanted to, not about him as a person, but as a presence, as a shadow. I wondered when he had reappeared in Valeria's life, without me noticing. At what point had he stopped being an absence to become an option? It bothered me to admit it, but there was something deeper than anger. There was fear. Fear that he would occupy a place I had held alone for years. Fear that, in the end, all my effort would be easily replaceable. I tried to justify myself 1,000 times. I told myself I had been clear from the beginning, that Valeria had accepted the condition, that no one had forced her. I repeated to myself that boundaries are necessary, that without boundaries, sacrifice becomes invisible. And yet, every time those ideas seemed to settle, another uncomfortable question would arise. Whether I was truly defending a boundary, or if I was punishing disobedience. There was one afternoon when I sat down to reread the messages Valeria had shown in the video call. Not to torture myself, or at least that's what I told myself. I wanted to understand how they had sounded from the outside. I read phrases I recognized instantly, phrases written after long days, after minor arguments that accumulated. I'd rather see you alone than betraying me. At that moment, I had felt I was expressing a fear. Now it sounded like a threat. That's when something started to crack in my internal narrative, because I didn't see myself as someone who threatens, I saw myself as someone who protects. But the line between one thing and the other, I understood too late, can be very thin, especially when money comes into play. One night, I received a message from a distant aunt. She didn't ask how I was. She told me directly that Valeria was very hurt, that she felt I had made her choose, that it wasn't about Esteban, but about her right to decide who was in her life. I replied with a dry thank you. I closed the conversation without clarifying anything. I didn't want to argue with intermediaries. I also didn't want to hear truths I hadn't asked for. I started to remember moments from Valeria's childhood that I had filed away as minor anecdotes, casual questions, passing comments. Once, when she was about 10, she asked me if her dad had left because of her. I told her no, that adults sometimes make bad decisions. I thought that was enough. I never touched the subject again. Maybe she did. I realized that I had always managed the story from my place, from my pain, from my version, not out of malice, but for survival. It was easier to build a world where Esteban simply didn't exist than to accept that for Valeria, that absence had left unanswered questions. I had learned to live without him. She had learned to live with the void. A few days later, I received an email from one of the suppliers. They were confirming the partial refund of the money. I read the figures without feeling anything. Before, it would have hurt to lose that amount. Now it was irrelevant. The real cost wasn't on any receipt. That same night, I dreamt of the wedding, not the ceremony, but the empty venue. The tables set, the flowers wilting, the music playing for no one. I was standing in the center alone, holding an envelope with money that no one wanted. I woke up with a bitter feeling, as if the dream had said out loud something I refused to admit. I thought about writing Valeria a long letter, explaining everything, telling her what I had felt for years, telling her it hadn't been about control, that it had been out of fear. I opened the document several times and closed it without writing a single line. I was afraid that any explanation would sound like an excuse or, worse, like manipulation. I wondered what would have happened if, instead of canceling everything, I had taken a step back. If I had said I wasn't going to attend, but that I respected her decision, if I had let go of the money and with it, part of the power that, without realizing it, I had accumulated. Not because it was the right thing to do, but because maybe it would have been less devastating. But decisions don't work in hypotheticals, they work in facts. And the fact was that I had canceled the wedding, I had used the only resource I had to set a boundary, and now that boundary left me on the other side of the door alone. One morning, almost out of habit, I looked at the calendar. The wedding date was still marked with a circle. I hadn't erased it. I stared at it for a long time. I thought about Valeria, about where she would be that day. I thought about myself, about what I would be doing. I realized that regardless of who was right, nothing was going to be the same. The conflict was no longer outside. It wasn't Valeria against me, nor Esteban reappearing as a trigger. The conflict was inside, in that uncomfortable mix of wounded pride and late guilt, in the question that repeated itself with less volume but more weight each time. Whether in defending my place, I hadn't ended up pushing my daughter out of it. The day that would have been the wedding arrived without emotional warning, as things you no longer expect anything from do. I woke up early out of habit, and it took me a few seconds to remember why my chest felt so heavy. Then I understood. I looked at the calendar, and the circle was still there, intact, almost insolent. I hadn't erased it because erasing something doesn't make it disappear, it just conceals it. There were no flowers, no music, no people coming and going from the house. There was cold coffee, and a silence that was no longer surprising. I dressed like any other day, not in black or light colors. I didn't want to give it a special meaning, but it had one anyway. Mid-morning, the phone rang. It was Valeria, not to come back, not to fix anything, just to let me know she would be stopping by later to pick up some things. Her tone was polite, distant, like someone who no longer expects understanding. She said she didn't want to argue. I told her that was fine. Neither of us added anything else. When she arrived, she didn't come all the way in. She stayed near the door, as if the house no longer belonged to her. She started gathering what she had left: clothes, papers, a box of memories. I watched her move through the rooms with a mixture of familiarity and strangeness. She was my daughter, but also someone who was leaving in a way I didn't know if I could ever reverse. At one point, she asked me if I had spoken to Esteban. After all, I shook my head. She didn't quite believe me. She told me he had insisted on helping, that he had even proposed organizing something smaller. She didn't sound grateful. She sounded tired, as if even for her, that late appearance was no longer enough. I told her it wasn't fair for him to show up only when there was something to celebrate. That you don't enter a story in the last chapter expecting applause. Valeria looked at me intently and replied with something I didn't expect. She said that for her, It wasn't about celebrating him, but about understanding herself, that I had always talked about sacrifice, but that I had never asked her what she needed to close that part of her life. There, the argument shifted. We were no longer talking about the wedding or the money or even Esteban. We were talking about us, about a relationship built on a tacit loyalty that no one had questioned until now. She told me she felt that if she didn't comply with my conditions, she would lose me, that this had accompanied her since she was a child, although she had never said it like that. I tried to defend myself. I said I had always been there, that I had never abandoned her, that everything I did was to protect her. She didn't deny any of that, she just said that protecting is not always the same as letting someone choose. That phrase hung between us, heavy, impossible to dodge. Before she left, she asked me if I regretted canceling everything. I didn't know what to answer. The truth was more complicated than a yes or a no. I regretted the outcome, not the intention. But that usually doesn't matter when the damage is already done. I told her I didn't know. She nodded, as if that answer confirmed something she already suspected. When she closed the door, I felt a loss different from the day she left with the suitcase. This time, there were no shouts or pending reproaches. There was a more orderly, more dangerous distance, the kind that's built when both parties believe they've said everything. In the afternoon, I received messages from relatives. Some asked how I was, others directly gave their opinions, that maybe I had been too harsh, that maybe you have to give in sometimes, that blood is thicker than water. I read everything, without responding. I no longer felt like explaining my version, nor did I want to hear advice that came too late. I found out again through third parties that Valeria had spent the day with friends, that she had avoided Esteban, that there was no alternative celebration, nothing. The reconciliation attempt had been left hanging in the air, just like everything else. That gave me a bitter feeling. Not even the sacrifice had served any concrete purpose, it had only left wreckage. That night I sat alone at the large dining table, the one we had chosen for the wedding. I ran my hand over the surface, as if I could feel what didn't happen. I thought about all the irreversible decisions one makes, believing there's still room. I thought about how the money I saw as a tool had transformed into a border. For the first time, I allowed myself an idea that I had avoided until then. Maybe Valeria hadn't betrayed an agreement. Maybe I had mistaken a favor for a contract. Maybe my legitimate pain had turned into an impossible condition for someone who needed something else. I didn't cry, I didn't break down, I just felt a deep weariness, the kind that doesn't go away with sleep. I understood that the loss was no longer potential, it was concrete, and that even if we ever spoke again, something of what we were had been definitively left on that day without a wedding, at that empty table, at that door that closed without a sound. But with enough weight never to open the same way again. The following days were disturbingly similar. I would wake up, do what was necessary, and go back to bed with the feeling of having gone through everything without having been in anything. The house seemed to tidy itself, or maybe it was me, removing traces with a neatness I didn't feel. I put away Valeria's mug, took down the coat from behind the door, removed the list from the fridge, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. I didn't speak to Esteban again either. He insisted. His offer of help remained floating like an uncomfortable anecdote. No one resumed the plans. The suppliers closed the matter. The money that was lost stopped hurting as soon as I understood that there were much more expensive things that can't be recovered with refunds. Contact with Valeria was minimal. A short message every now and then. Polite replies. Without warmth. She didn't reproach me for anything. And that, in a way, was worse. There was no fight to resolve, just a new distance that had settled in without asking permission. I realized I had always thought of abandonment as something abrupt, violent, never as something that settles in slowly. I began to wonder what I had really defended, whether it was a legitimate boundary or a way of not ceding the place I had occupied for years. I told myself that no one has the right to demand forgiveness, and I still believe that. But I also started to accept that no one should have to pay with their own emotional life for a debt they didn't incur. One night, I reread my own messages, this time without looking for excuses. I saw the tone. I saw the rigidity. I saw how sacrifice, unintentionally, had turned into a currency. I didn't like what I found. I couldn't deny it either. I don't feel like a villain, but I can no longer see myself only as the one who was harmed. I defended something I built alone, yes, but in doing so, I left little room for my daughter to build her own without feeling that she was losing me in the process. Now the house is silent, and there's nothing to organize. There's no wedding, no celebration, there's time. And a question that returns every time I try to justify myself. If protecting my boundaries was worth the price of being alone. Story 2. I used my son's savings to save his sister. Today he sued me, and I don't know if I deserve it. Before we go on, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. I'm not a thief. I don't like to think of myself as a bad person. But when you're a mother and you see one of your children crying, trembling, begging, something inside you breaks. My son Alex is 29. He went to the United States at 18 with a borrowed backpack, secondhand clothes, and a determination that made me feel proud and guilty at the same time. Proud of the strength he had, guilty because in some way I felt we were failing him by not being able to offer him a dignified life in his own country. From there he started helping us, first with $100, then $200, then $1,000. With that money we paid off debts, fixed the house, and even bought a piece of land. For 10 years, Alex sent his sweat converted into transfers and always said the same thing. Save this for when I come back. For my business, for my life. He never stopped trusting me. I was his guardian, his base, his mother. And then there's Mariana, my younger daughter, 27, beautiful, sensitive, and lost. She changed her major 3 times, dropped out of college. Every time it seemed like she was about to take off, she sabotaged herself, and I was always there to pick up the pieces. 2 months ago, she came home crying. She was pale, gaunt, trembling. She told me she was sick, that she needed money urgently for treatment, that she had looked for options, that no one else could help her. She told me about a center abroad. She didn't go into medical details, but her desperation was real. Please, Mom, I swear if I don't do this now I won't get out of this. I told her we didn't have that money, that it was a lot, that we barely made ends meet with what Alex sent us, and the little her father earned. And Alex's savings? She asked with a broken voice. That's not to be touched, Mariana. It's not ours, but he's your son, my brother.
He would surely understand.
I can't take it anymore. Mom. She broke down in my arms. She cried like when she was a little girl, and her stomach hurt. I felt like a traitor if I did nothing. And if she was really sick, and if it was something mental, something she couldn't explain well, what kind of mother sees her daughter suffer and says, I'm sorry, I can't? That night, I talked to my husband. I told him the situation. I told him Mariana was unwell, that she needed help urgently. We don't have that money. And if you're thinking of touching Alex's, don't even think about it. What if we explain to him? If we pay him back later, that money is not yours or mine. It's his. He sends it to you because he trusts you, not because it's part of a common purse. I didn't sleep that night. I got up 3 times. I sat in front of the drawer where we kept the documents and savings books. I opened it, closed it, opened it again. I thought of Alex as a child, of Mariana playing in the yard, of the lunches where we laughed. Of the family Sundays. I thought, family is that, isn't it? Helping each other, understanding each other, rescuing each other when one is falling. And I did it. I took half of the savings. Exactly half. I didn't tell anyone. I gave it to Mariana the next day. Do what you have to do, I told her. But take care of yourself. She hugged me tight. She kissed my forehead. She said, Thank you, Mom. You saved my life. I thought I had done the right thing.
I thought my son would understand.
I thought family could handle anything until a week later. Alex came back from the United States without warning. I saw him from the window, backpack on his shoulder, a light-colored, somewhat wrinkled shirt. Those dark eyes I had known since I held him in my arms, now more tired, but with that spark that never left him. My son Alex came back without warning. I opened the door and hugged him without thinking. He held me tight, but I noticed his voice didn't tremble like mine. I'm back, Mom. He finally did it with a voluntary deportation. As he explained to me later, legal, planned, he didn't want to stay there anymore. He said he had thought about it a lot, that he had done enough, that now he wanted to live, not just survive. He had everything measured, the money he had sent me in 10 years, what he had saved himself, what his father used to advance the construction of his house. All added up gave him just enough for what he dreamed of, his workshop. Now it's my time, Mom. My house is almost ready. Not much left. I'm going to set up my carpentry shop. Just like I said when I left. He smiled, but I felt the ground moving under my feet. I asked if he wanted to rest, but he immediately started walking around the house. He looked at every corner, touched the wooden porch that he himself had paid for with his first savings. He stopped in front of the window. It hasn't changed much, has it? And I wanted to cry, because it had changed, because I had done something I still didn't know how to tell him. I didn't sleep that night, nor the next. On the third day, Alex came with his notebook. Mom, I need you to give me what you had saved, what you were saving for me for the business.
Now? I asked.
Yes, this week the machines I need go on sale. I have a friend who will hold some for me. It's the opportunity. I swallowed hard. I felt something inside me turn off. Son, we need to talk.
He sat down.
He looked at me calmly, as if he already knew something was wrong. I lent a part of the money to your sister. He didn't say anything at first, just stayed silent. Then he frowned very slightly. What part? Half. Half. He nodded once. He looked down. He took a deep breath. But when he looked at me again, his eyes were not the same. You gave half of my savings to Mariana. The 10 years I worked there, that I sent you with trust, with clear instructions.
She was sick.
Alex, she begged me crying. She told me it was urgent, that it was her health. And you didn't tell me anything. Your sister is your blood, just like you. I couldn't let her suffer. He stood up abruptly. And what am I, Mom? A wallet. A savings account for when it's convenient for you. No, Alex, please. Yes, Mom, because if I did the same thing there, if I gave anyone what I had, I'd be screwed now. But you took it from me with your excuse of, she's my daughter. And what am I then? Your client. My husband, hearing the shouts, came out of the room. What's going on? Alex looked at him directly. Mom gave half of my money to Mariana. Without telling me, without telling you, without warning. My husband didn't look at me. He just lowered his head. I told you not to do it, he murmured. But she was our daughter, I shouted. She was sick. I had no choice. Of course you had a choice, my husband said dryly. And you took the worst one. Are you really both against me now? No, Alex said. We're not against you. We just want what's fair.
Fair.
Fair is that now you treat me like a thief. I'm her mother. I did what I thought was right. Alex said no more. He just looked at me as if he didn't recognize me. You're not the woman I sent my life to in envelopes every month. And he left. He closed the door calmly, and that hurt more than if he had slammed it. I stood in the living room with the words stuck in my throat, but the worst was yet to come. Not even 5 days passed before Mariana returned. Without warning, without luggage, without explanations, she knocked on the door as if nothing had happened. She came with her hair tied back, dark glasses, and a light jacket. Despite the heat, she didn't look sick. She didn't have a pale face or a weak body of someone who had just come out of medical treatment. On the contrary, she was tanned and smelled of expensive perfume. I let her in. Alex wasn't home. My husband looked at her with a mixture of surprise and anger. But I still wanted to understand, to know, to cling to the idea that all this had been worth it. How are you? I asked.
Fine, Mom.
Thanks for the support. Seriously. Did you go to the center? Did they treat you? What center? I was silent. The place you told me, the treatment, your illness. Mariana looked at me as if I was misremembering a minor detail.
Oh, that.
Well, in the end I didn't go. I changed my mind. I traveled to relax. I was collapsing. I needed to get away. It helped. I'm better now. Better from what? From everything, Mom. From the anxiety of being here. From feeling trapped. My husband said nothing, got up and locked himself in the room. I couldn't move. And the money? I asked with a broken voice. I used it. On what? Well, the flight, the hotel, food, a couple of things I needed. I met someone there. He helped me a lot, but then we fought and I came back. Do you have anything left? Mariana looked at me as if I had asked if there were any cookies left. No, not anymore. At that moment I heard the bedroom door open. My husband came out, went straight to the living room and spoke to me bluntly. I already talked to Alex. He wants his money back. All of it. We don't have that amount anymore, I replied. No, but there's a way to get it. I knew it before he said it. I had felt it for days, like a shadow creeping behind every thought. The land.
Exactly.
We sell it and pay off the debt. No, that land is in my name. It cost me years. It was with sacrifice.
Yes.
With your son's sacrifice? With your son's money. It's not yours. Of course it's mine. I managed it. I took care of it. And for what? To give it to Mariana, so she can go on vacation, my husband said without raising his voice. His calmness hurt more than any shout. So your son comes back and finds his future ruined. I didn't ruin it, I just used a part. His sister needed it. His sister, who isn't even sick, he snapped. Mariana, sitting on the edge of the sofa, just shrugged. I already used it. What do you want me to do? She said with disdain. My husband looked at her as if she were no longer part of our blood. I told Alex that if you don't agree to sell it, he'll take legal action. He's furious, hurt, and I don't blame him. And you? You're not going to defend me. I warned you. You made a decision you knew was dangerous. Now there are consequences. This is no longer me against you. This is you against your son, and you're going to let him sue me. He didn't answer. And there I knew he would, that he was willing to do anything to repair the damage. Even if it meant leaving me alone. Even if it meant choosing one of our children over the other. Even if it meant sacrificing me. I'm not selling the land, I said firmly. Then he'll do it the hard way, he replied.
And he did.
A week later, I received a notice. My son was suing me. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. I read it once, then again, and still I couldn't believe it. My son was taking me to court, not for a misunderstanding, not to clear things up as a family, for fraud and misappropriation of assets. What hurt me the most was not the cold, illegal language of the document. It was the signature at the end, Alex R., his name, my son's. With the same handwriting with which he wrote to me, Mom, I love you, when he sent me cards from the north. During the days before the trial, I tried to talk to him. I went to his workshop, he didn't let me in. I called, he blocked me, I wrote him a letter. I never got a reply. So I clung to my husband. I thought at least he would understand, but we were no longer a married couple. We were two people sharing different guilts. He just wants what's his, he told me. And you're not going to defend me. I warned you not to do it. You ignored me. You lied to me. And now you expect me to lie for you. I said nothing. I just lowered my head. The day of the trial, I sat alone on the defendant's bench. Mariana didn't come. She gave no sign of life. My husband was on the other side next to Alex, not as a witness, not as a neutral party, as a witness for the plaintiff. The judge was young, direct. He asked for evidence, documents, bank movements. Alex had them all. Screenshots of our conversations, transfer records, photos of the deposits. He even kept the audio where he told me, Mom, that money is for my business. Save it. I trust you. When it was his turn to testify, my husband walked to the stand with a firmness that broke my heart. Can you confirm that your wife used the money sent by your son without his authorization? Yes, Your Honor. Do you know how much it was? Half of the total he saved for 10 years. Did she consult you before making that decision?
No.
I found out later. He looked at me only once, without hatred, without tenderness, as if he no longer recognized me. When it was my turn to speak, my voice barely came out, but I tried. I'm a mother. I have 2 children. Mariana begged me. She told me she was sick. She cried. She hugged me. I was just trying to save her. And why didn't you consult the owner of the money? I was afraid he would say no. And if she was really sick, how was I going to forgive myself for not helping her? So you decided for him. Yes, I was wrong, but I did it out of love. Out of a mother's love. The judge nodded. He didn't judge me. He just paused and wrote something. The sentence came 3 weeks later. I had to return all the money plus interest plus legal costs, and since I had no way, I had to sell the land. The same land I had helped to get. The same one where I dreamed of building a house to grow old peacefully. The only place that still made me feel safe. I lost it. And when I signed the sale papers, I felt like I was also signing my disappearance from their lives. I went back home, to the house where I was no longer welcome. I picked up my things. My husband was waiting for me in the living room with the bags ready. You can't stay here, he said without raising his voice. You're kicking me out. I asked you to reflect. You didn't. And Mariana? Where's Mariana? I don't know. I don't care. So this is how it ends. You decided that. That night, I slept on an air mattress a neighbor lent me in a 2-room apartment with damp on the walls. I went to bed without dinner, and in the middle of the darkness, I knew I no longer had a family, no house, no husband, no children. I was only left with the echo of the trial, repeating itself over and over in my head. I trust you, and you betrayed him. That phrase haunts me. It's in the walls, in the sound of the dripping shower, in the echo of my steps every time I cross this gray apartment. I repeat it without meaning to, as if my mind is trying to punish me every minute for what I did. Now we live here, Mariana and I. Although to say we live is an exaggeration. She occupies one of the 2 rooms, I the other. But we don't talk, we don't eat together, we don't ask how we are, we just share the oxygen and the silence. It's been like this since we arrived. The first few days Mariana just slept. Then she started going out without saying where. Sometimes she came back late, other times she didn't come back at all. One day I confronted her. I asked her directly, "What did you do with the money?" She looked at me as if the question were an offense. I already told you. I spent it. It helped me. End of story. Helped you with what, Mariana? To understand that no one is going to save me, Mom. Not you, not Alex, not anyone, just me. And that's why you ruined me. Ruined you. You think this is about you. She got up from the couch annoyed. She walked around the room with contained fury, as if she wanted to break something, but didn't know what. I grew up in your shadow and Alex's the perfect one. You the martyr, and me what? Always the one who disappoints, the one who's not worth it, the one who needs to be corrected. The mistake with a name. Her words hit me harder than any court sentence. You weren't a mistake, Mariana, I said with a trembling voice. Then why did I live as if I were? I didn't know what to answer, because maybe she was right. Maybe I always treated her like someone who needed fixing. You also decided for me, she continued. You gave me the money, without asking what I would use it for. You just wanted to feel good. You wanted to redeem yourself for everything you didn't do right with me, but it didn't work. And you know why? She looked at me intently. Because I didn't want to be saved. I just wanted to be heard. And she left. She left the room, the house, my life. She didn't come back that night or the next or after. She left me a note. Few words. Don't look for me.
I don't want this.
I can't be your redemption. Since then I sleep alone. I eat alone. I talk to myself because there's no one else to listen. Sometimes I look out the window just to make sure the world still exists outside. And yes, it does. I saw on social media the inauguration of Alex's workshop. He and his father are smiling in a photo surrounded by new wood with a sign that says, "Our carpentry, what is cared for grows." I laughed to myself. Not out of mockery, out of irony, because I also wanted to care, but it seems that what I touched withered. The 2 rooms of this place are empty now. One with my things, another with the memory of my daughter, and in between the silence. A silence so dense that it's hard for me to breathe, but there was still something more. One last wound I didn't expect, a closure that came in the form of a letter. A letter arrived under the door, without a return address, without prior notice, without a bell, just a white envelope, sealed with tape and my name written in a clean, firm handwriting, my son's. I knew before I opened it. I knew it wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation. It was something final. I sat at the table, that second-hand one that barely stands, and opened it with cold hands. Inside there were no words of love or long explanations, just a legal document, a form of waiver of any future obligation to me. Alex wanted nothing more to do with me. No kind of legal, family, emotional relationship, nothing. Below the letterhead there was a handwritten sentence, a single line. Some things break forever. I read it 3 times, then I left it on the table and sat there for hours. That was the exact moment when I understood that I no longer even belonged to his name. He didn't call me Mom, he didn't sign as your son. I was just a part of the past that he had decided to legally bury. And I don't blame him. I can't. I did something terrible. I took his trust, his effort, his future, and put it in the hands of someone who didn't know how to take care of it. I thought a mother's love was enough, that it would justify everything, but love doesn't build walls. It doesn't return money. It doesn't repair a betrayal. Sometimes I wake up thinking it was all a bad dream, that I'm still in our house, that Mariana didn't leave, that Alex is in the United States and sends me messages asking how we are. But then I see the damp stains on the ceiling, the unmade sheets, my daughter's empty room, and the silence. That silence that is no longer a punishment, it's a habit. I go out little, I buy just enough. I have no one to tell my days to. The neighbors look at me with pity or judgment, or worse, with indifference. Recently, I passed near Alex's workshop. I did it by accident coming back from the market. I saw it from the opposite sidewalk. He was with a smiling client talking about a table he had just finished. The sign was there, firm.
Er Carpentry.
He didn't meet my gaze, he didn't see me or didn't want to see me. And for the first time I didn't cry, I just kept walking. Because maybe after all I deserve this emptiness. Maybe I'm not the victim, or the heroine, or the martyr. I'm just a mother who believed that loving was enough and was wrong. And in this life, sometimes mistakes are paid for with loneliness.